Welcome to the Avila Carmelite Centre here in Dublin, Ireland, on the Feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. Our Lady has had a very special place in the hearts of Carmelites right from the beginnings of the order back in the early 13th century. The first hermits on Mount Carmel near the modern Haifa felt an affinity to Our Lady because of their closeness to Nazareth and built a chapel in her honour. Soon they were, as a result of persecution, moved to England and France and other European countries, and they began to call themselves the Brothers of Our Lady of Mount Carmel. And so Our Lady was seen as a sister and mother from very early on. They believed that the order had been founded by God to give honour to the Mother of God, Mary. And soon the brown scapular became a symbol of devotion to Our Lady. The Carmelites have for many years chosen as the gospel for this feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel a short piece of chapter 19 of St. John's Gospel, verses 25 to 27. These short verses describe Mary with some of the women disciples and John, the beloved disciple, standing by the cross. And Jesus entrusts Mary to the care of John and John to the care of Mary. Tradition has seen Jesus handing John to Our Lady's care as a symbol of him handing over the whole church to the care of Our Lady. And the order has seen us as part of that we Carmelites are entrusted to the care of Mary too. It's a very interesting choice of gospel for the feast day, and I think it tells us something about the Carmelite way of following Our Lady. Like Mary, those who feel called to the Carmelite way, whether as lay people, nuns or friars, seem to be called to stand at the foot of the cross. And that means taking to our hearts the sufferings of Christ. Christ today, Christ who is still suffering in so many of his members. We can think, for instance, of migrants who suffer appalling conditions in their efforts to find a better standard of life. We think of the growing number of homeless people, many families in our cities today. We think of those who have suffered abuse at the hands of the church and whose lives have been scarred as a result. Those who are sick and have to wait a long time for care because they can't afford private care. Those who feel hopeless and can see only death as the way out. Prisoners who often come from disadvantaged backgrounds where there's little hope of a future, and the list could go on. And we could feel overwhelmed by the enormity of the sufferings and feel quite powerless. And I think Our Lady had some of that feeling herself at the foot of the cross. The enormity of what was happening around her and which seemed to make no sense. And maybe a sense of powerlessness that she could do nothing to stop it. But she did the important thing. She stayed by the foot of the cross. The most important thing that she as a mother could do. And she sanctified presence by her standing there. We can never underestimate the power, the healing power of presence. We as Carmelites are called to minister to the wounded Christ today, to be present to Christ in his suffering today. And we're called to a specific form of presence in prayer. And when we stay in prayer, we carry in our hearts the sufferings of our brothers and sisters. It might sound like an easier way of doing things, but those who stay faithful to this way find it is anything but easy. Because when we take to heart and take into prayer the pain of our suffering brothers and sisters, we feel it in a really profound way. It touches us very, very deeply. And our standing at the foot of the cross in prayer makes us channels of God's grace for our brothers and sisters. We share in Our Lady's ministry of care for the whole church. What Our Lady did on Calvary required a lot of faith, because what was going on around her seemed in many ways meaningless. It was very hard to make any sense of it. But she trusted in the power of God to make something good come out of what seemed utterly meaningless in human terms. And she models for us the faith that we have to practice in our standing by the cross. We can't give in to the temptation that the pain of the world is so great that God cannot overcome it. God can. Like Mary, we need faith to believe that God can bring something good out of even the worst situations. Like her, we must trust in the power of God.
Los Carmeli vitis florige